Shakespeare's sonnets are filled with what appear to be typographical or printing mistakes. These are actually clues that, when deciphered, reveal hidden messages. There are two copies of the sonnets published with the year 1609. One edition reads, "To be sold by John Wright, dwelling at Christ Church Gate." The other, which some refer to as the variant copy, is printed with the name William Aspley with no location. From what I've read, of the 13 existing copies of the 1609 sonnets, there are only 4 with this imprint. Both copies share most of the same so-called mistakes, but one of them is printed with a few more. In the Aspley edition, the catchword "or" beneath Sonnet 14 is printed with a dot or point under it. This point is missing from the Wright copy. Also in the Aspley edition, in Sonnet 58 and Sonnet 60 on the other side of the page, times and eclipses both appear with points. The Wright copy does not. And in the variant copy, the number for Sonnet 36 is printed to also resemble a 38. The Wright copy has simply a 36. I believe this helps solve another mystery, but that'll be a subject covered hopefully in the next video. Okay, now here's the thing. The Wright copy being printed without these points makes all the difference, because without them the message "Let there be light, Rosy cross" cannot be found. By printing them in the variant copy, we can find this message 3 times, which is important because for a code or message like this to be true, it should adhere to the tria sunt omnia principle, all things in 3. Before we start, it's important to understand that there are codes in the sonnets based on what John Dee explains in his work Monas Hieroglyphica. In it, he tells the printer to carefully copy the various letters, points, lines, diagrams, shapes, numbers, and other things. A point is a dot or a period, and these are used to encode messages in the sonnets. He also mentions what he refers to as the primary alphabets of the 3 languages, Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. Keep that in mind. He also says that he uses the Kabbalistic methods of Gematria, Notaricon, and Zeruf, which I'll explain when they are being applied. I've shown this part of the code in several videos, but I need to explain it again so we can understand the other messages, which I haven't gone over before. In the variant copy, Sonnets 9, 10, 18, 122, and the catchword "or" are all printed with points. The point beneath "or" is missing from the Wright copy. Looking closer at the last sonnet printed with a point in the variant copy, you can see that the second 2 in 122 has been scored with a vertical line, making it kind of look like a reversed letter S. The score is missing from Sonnet 122 in the Wright copy. In the variant, this is where the code begins, reading the numbers from the left of the point, right to left. These marked numbers result in gematria values, where numbers are equivalent to letters. The catchword "or" serves as a fulcrum and separates the code into 2 parts, one Hebrew, one Greek. The number used gematria and their Latin alphabet equivalent to reveal the message. Again, Dee mentions these alphabets and Kabbalistic methods in Monas Hieroglyphica. Rosicrucian codes are often read from right to left, so starting with Sonnet 122, writing the first half of the code down, right to left, we get 221 and 81. There are no gematria equivalents for 221 or 81 in the basic Latin alphabet, so the key to understanding what's here is that printers of the day use the same character for the letter I and the Roman numeral 1. To translate the numbers into their gematria values, simply write down 221 as 22 and the letter I. The same with 18. 18 right to left is 81 or 8 in the letter I. The number 10 isn't separated into the letter I and 0 because there is no letter equal to 0. The 9 and 10 remain as they are because now we have number values that are equal to letters. The message uses John Dee's primary alphabets of the three languages, Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. Applying gematria, translating the numbers of the first half of the message to letters, 22 is equal to the letter Y, and 8 is equal to the letter H. Again, the Roman numerals are also letter I's. 22I8I translates to YIHI. Yehi followed by the catchword or. Yehi or is Hebrew and means fiat lux, or let there be light, God's first spoken words at the beginning of Genesis. The second part of the message is Greek. The gematria values of the numbers 10 and 9 are equal to K and I respectively, which is pronounced ki, just like the Greek letter for X, spelled CHI. Ki is a cross, and to confirm that this is referring to a cross, we simply add 10 and 9, totaling 19. 19 is equal to the letter T or tau, which is also a cross. The catchword or is now flipped and read the other direction, spelling rho, the Greek letter for R. So we have rho ki or rho tau, which are initials for Rosicrucian. Looking at it again this way, the marked sonnet numbers and catchword or are written down. 221 and 81 are 22I and 8I. Everything can now be converted into gematria values. Rosicrucian codes are often read right to left like Hebrew, and that's what we do here. YIHI or and rho ki. 9 and 10 also added 19, which is equal to T. So it's Yehi or rho ki or rho tau. Using gematria, we discover that the points printed with these sonnet numbers and the catchword or are not printing mistakes. They encode the message, let there be light, Rosy Cross. The John Wright edition of the sonnets is missing the point beneath or, and without it we can't spell Yehi or rho tau. Next we use Notaricon, where we take the first letter of each marked sonnet to form a new word. Sonnet 9 begins with the letter I. The number for Sonnet 10 appears as a catchword at the end of the page and is printed with a point, and then Sonnet 10 begins with the letter F. Sonnet 18 begins with S, and Sonnet 122 with the letter T. We continue to use the marked catchword or, so altogether the letters are IFORST. We then apply zirif, which is rearranging letters to make new words, like an anagram. One spelling we get is F Rosy T, which is an abbreviated form of Fratris Rosicrucis, or Brothers of the Rosy Cross. So that's the Rosy Cross half of the message. Next we need to find a word that has something to do with light. Applying zirif again, we get fortes, which is Latin and can mean strong, powerful, or brave. It's also a homophone of four T's, or 4T, which can be written as four-letter T's. Now before I explain what I believe is the Rosicrucian meaning of this word, I need to go over something else. First, let me point out that, like I explained, using Notaricon and then zirif, we get the words 4T's and F Rosy T. Now here's the thing. The first message we saw was, let there be light, Rosy Cross. And here we have 4T's and Rosy Cross. We're going to look at 4T's again in a minute, but there's another let there be light, Rosy Cross message that I haven't shown before. When we turn to Sonnet 58, we see there's a point printed over the word times. Flip the page, and on the other side of it, in Sonnet 60, there's another point printed beneath the word eclipses. These only appear in the Aspley edition of the Sonnets. The Wright doesn't have them. Looking closer at the word times, just like with Sonnet 122, we read everything to the left of the point. Right to left, the letters spell E-M-I-T, emit. Emit means to send forth as in light or a sound. It comes from the Latin emittere, which means to send out, and is an assimilated form of ex, meaning out of or out from. Turn the page, and the meaning of eclipses is darkness. So, marked by points that are missing from the John Wright copy of the Sonnets, we have the words emit and eclipses, which translates to ex or out of darkness. And there's one more thing. The point beneath eclipses is printed next to the letters P and T. In Greek, the letter R or rho is written like a Latin letter P. The position of the point gives us the Greek letters for rho tau, again initials for Rosy cross. So by simply placing these 2 points in a clever way, missing from the right copy, we get the message out of darkness, which I think alludes to Bible verses like John 1:5 and 2 Corinthians 4:6 about light shining out of darkness. I believe it's another way of saying, let there be light, Rosy cross. Something else about these 2 dots is that if you hold the page up to a light, they appear to line up next to each other. I think this might represent light separating from an eclipse or maybe a Rosicrucian signature. Alright, so we have 2 messages about the Rosy cross and light shining forth. And a third message where half of it spells F Rosy T for Brothers of the Rosy Cross and the other half spells the word forties. Doesn't it stand to reason then that this word should have something to do with light or bringing light forth? I know in Latin fortes means strong, powerful, or brave, but it's also a homophone of fortes or forti. And though it turns up often in codes, no one's for sure exactly what forti means. We know 4T or 40 has something to do with Edward de Vere, whose cipher is 1740. The 17 is because he was the 17th Earl of Oxford. The 40, again, no one knows for sure. There are many things 40 can be equal to. De Vere sometimes signed his name double V, and the gematria value of 2-letter V's are equal to 40, as do the letters spelling ox, O-X-E. Another researcher who posts under the name Zantlo Zantlam has pointed out that Ra, the French word for king, also equals 40. The second syllable of Oxford, 4D, is also a homophone of 40. And Chris Johnson, aka Nobody Oxfordian, believes that 40 is the number position of the monarch following Queen Elizabeth, who was the 39th monarch after Egbert, the first Saxon king recognized as sovereign of all England. There's also something I figured out a while ago. The letter T is equal to 19, and the gematria value of 4 T's is 76, which equal the letters spelling the name Oxford. With gematria, there's a bond and similarity between words of equal value, so 4 T's or 4T and Oxford can mean the same thing. Now these ideas can all work for the number 40, and I believe some do play a role. But I think to know what 40 or 4T is, we have to understand the meaning of the 4th T. The sonnet's dedication is divided into 3 inverted triangles of 6, 2, and 4 lines. 624 or June 24th is Midsummer's Day, the day Edward de Vere is said to have died, and the nativity of John the Baptist, a patron saint of Freemasonry. Watching Alexander Wa's videos, I learned that John Rollitt discovered that if you count every 6th, 2nd, and 4th word, 624, we get the message, these sonnets all by Ever the 4th T. Ever is an anagram of Vere and a short form of Vere. 4T and 1740 are probably the most common codes we find. I recently posted a video showing on the first page of the second quarto of Hamlet, there's a rebus and an inverted T that, counting from the top of the page, is the 4th T. It's comprised of the words, and I am 4 T's. This is reminiscent of the upside-down fourth T rebus in the Sonnets dedication grid explained in Wa's videos Where is Shakespeare Really Buried? It's part of a cross potent, a cross comprised of 4 T's with letters spelling de Vere. Beneath it are the letters fourth, making de Vere the fourth T. So if Edward de Vere is the fourth T, what does it mean? Some of us think de Vere was part of a secret society, and I've found several Rosy cross codes throughout the Shakespeare works. I believe de Vere was a high-ranking Rosicrucian or similar Templar-based Freemasonic organization, and possibly the leader, a position that would later go to Francis Bacon. Still, what is the fourth T? A fellow researcher and correspondent named Jack has proposed the idea that the fourth T represents John the Baptist. There's a unique scene at the baptism of Jesus where it's the only time when God, the Holy Spirit, Jesus, and John appear together. The letter T or tau is a cross and stands for God, who's a Trinity. So we have 3 T's. John, often depicted holding a cross, is the fourth T. When you look into secret societies, you'll read things like the Templars venerating John above Jesus, and how the Mandaeans, a religious order still in existence today, don't believe that Jesus is the final and greatest prophet, but John is. Now in the Gospels, one of the things that happens when John performs the baptism is a light shines upon Jesus. John's act of baptism has brought God's light. In Matthew 11:11, twice 11, Jesus says that, born of women, there are none greater than John the Baptist. And in John 5:35, Jesus calls him a burning and shining light. Earlier in the Gospel, Jesus also says that John was not the light that Jesus is, but again, he does refer to him as a light. So great was the baptizer that before Jesus began his mission, God sent John to prepare the way for him. In Greek Orthodox hymnology, I found a hymn named Ut Quiant Laxus, where John is referred to as the day star, also known as the morning star, a name applied to the planet Venus because it's the light seen before the sun rises. For this reason, Venus is also known as Lucifer, which means the lightbringer. Jesus also refers to himself as the morning star in Revelation 22:16, but John is known by some to be the light that appears before the sun. So just like the morning star Venus is the light that prepares the way for the rising sun, John was a burning and shining light that prepared the way for Jesus. Now follow the logic. We have a code in 2 parts. There's a message about bringing light and another about the Rosy cross. It's the same with the Gematria code when it's translated. Let there be light, Rosy cross. These codes are found in 3s, so if the second half of the message is Brothers of the Rosy Cross, I think 4 T's or 4T, which is another way of saying the fourth T, is something or someone who brings light, similar to John the Baptist. Just as John was the shining light who prepared the way for Jesus. And Venus, the morning star, is the first light that brings the light of the sun. I think Edward de Vere as the fourth T or 4T was the light bringer whose rosy cross would illuminate the world. The Brotherhood's goal was to transform the arts and sciences and the religious, political, and intellectual landscapes of Europe, and as alchemists advanced the evolution of consciousness. Regarding this code, I think 4 T's is essentially the fiat lux, the let there be light half of the message. Now check this out. After I'd reached the conclusion based on Jack's idea about John the Baptist that the fourth T is a title given to someone considered to be a light bringer, and that the word 4 T's is used in a way that means fiat lux, I found out there's another interesting definition of the word. Like I mentioned earlier, fortis is Latin and can mean strong, powerful, or brave. When you look into its etymology, it appears to also derive from a word meaning to rise. Now here's the thing. Many years after Shakespeare, like centuries later, linguists started using the word fortis in English to mean a speech sound made with a greater than usual amount of force, and a consonant produced with great force resulting in an explosive sound. So here I'm suggesting the fourth T is someone who's a force that brings light, and fortis is used in one of three Fiat Lux Rosy cross codes to mean a lightbringer, the let there be light half of the message, which was God's command that brought light into the universe. Then sometime in the late 19th century, fortis becomes defined as a speech sound produced with a great amount of force, resulting in an explosive sound. Now, isn't that what Fiat Lux is? Wouldn't God's command bringing light into the universe be the ultimate fortis sound? It's 3 centuries before the printing of the Sonnets and the first known use of fortis with this definition, so I don't know what to make of that. Maybe fortis was used this way in secret by the Rosicrucians, and eventually it made its way out into the public. I have no idea if that's the case, or if it really is just a strange coincidence. Alright, so if Edward de Vere is the fourth T, or forti, I think it means he's the lightbringer. De Vere was referred to as Apollo, or Phoebus, another name for Apollo, by his contemporaries. Apollo was the god of the sun and light, as well as poetry, truth, and many other things. But I believe the concept of the fourth T is referring to John the Baptist, and is the title given to someone who's the force that brings light. Just as John, who was himself a shining light, the first light who prepared the way for Jesus, fortis or forti is the light bringer who's followed by the light of the Rosy Cross. I think that's why we find this typesetting on page 1 of Genesis in the 1611 King James Bible. Right after God says, "Let there be light," there are 17 lines to the end of the column, followed by 40 lines to the end of the page. 1740 is Edward de Vere's cipher, and the last word on the page is over, printed with a comma above the O, which serves as an accent. An O with an accent means of, and of in French and other languages is de. Over is a Vere or de Vere. Let there be light, 1740, de Vere. Turn the page following the Fiat Lux 1740 de Vere code. There are 17 words after over or de Vere, immediately followed by the number for verse 19. The gematria value of 17 is equal to the letter R, and 19 is equal to T. This means that after the Fiat Lux 1740 de Vere code, we get numbers equivalent to initials for Rosy Cross. That's pretty extraordinary, and if you think all that typesetting just happened by chance, well, it didn't. The Bible is encoded, which I show in other videos. Alright, so on the first page of Genesis, leading into the second, we have Fiat Lux 1740 de Vere Rosy Cross. De Vere is the first light, followed by the Rosicrucian light. These 3 codes mean the same thing, light coming forth and the Rosy Cross, and because there are 3, they adhere to the tria sunt omnia principle. And they can only be found in the Aspley or variant copy of the Sonnets. I sent some of these findings to Alexander Waugh, and he explained that he thinks it's highly probable that the Wright was the trade edition of 1609, and the Aspley was printed later, possibly in 1619, with more Rosicrucian secrets hidden in it. Backdating did occur with the Shakespearean Pavier quartos, where in 1619, Thomas Pavier and William Jaggard published several Shakespeare quartos with dates like 1600 and 1609. Waugh sent this image showing how a line can be drawn from the dot after imprinted straight through the first dotted I of William and points to the 0 in 1609. Referring to a line from Sonnet 136, among number 1 is reckoned none, Shakespeare letting us know that 1 can be equal to 0, while suggested that the I or 1 in Roman numerals, pointing to the 0, might be a hint that the Aspley edition wasn't printed in 1609, but 1619 or 1619. Though he admits that this isn't the strongest of clues, Waugh believes the idea of Aspley and Wright sharing the honors of the same edition in the same year seems a bit odd. This is something else I recently figured out, and it appears in both editions of the Sonnets. Every left side page of the Sonnets has the name Shakespeare's printed along the top. Then, for no apparent reason, when we get to the page with Sonnets 27, 28, and the beginning of Sonnet 29, Shakespeare's is printed with a comma. When we flip the page, there is no punctuation after Shakespeare's. It's like that for a couple more pages, and then when we get to the page with Sonnets 42 and 43, Shakespeare's is printed with a period. After that, there's a period after Shakespeare's for the next few pages, and then stops on the page with Sonnets 61 and 62. And there's no punctuation after Shakespeare's until we get to the page with Sonnets 99, 100, and 101. There's punctuation after Shakespeare's for a few more pages, and then stops on the page with Sonnets 118, 119, and the beginning of 120. Now, if you look to the right at Sonnet 122, that's the last time there's any kind of punctuation after the name Shakespeare's or a sonnet number. I showed Sonnet 122 earlier. It's the last sonnet number printed with a point and begins the Fiat Lux message that uses gematria. This is the last period that appears to be out of place, whether after a sonnet number or after Shakespeare's name. The first punctuation after this period is the comma after the word gift, which is actually printed with 2 commas. What I figured out is the comma after Shakespeare's and the double comma after the period in Sonnet 122 are the start and stop, telling us where to begin and end counting. What we do is, starting with the page where Shakespeare's is printed with a comma, we count all of the numbers that stand out on any page where the name Shakespeare's is followed by punctuation. For example, here the numbers are 27, 28, and 29. The next page where Shakespeare's is punctuated, it's followed by a period. The numbers that stand out are 42 and 43. When we get to the page with sonnet numbers 56 and 57, the catchword for the next page is sonnet number 58 and is included in the count because it stands out on the page. Now the last page where Shakespeare's is printed with punctuation is on the page with sonnets 114 and 115. However, the code ends when we turn the page and find the last period that's out of place after sonnet number 122 and the double comma that follows. Now we don't count all the numbers on this page. It doesn't have the name Shakespeare's at the top, it has sonnets, but it immediately follows the last page where Shakespeare's is punctuated. The only number that's counted is 122. It's been singled out with this last out-of-place period and the 2 commas, which don't appear anywhere else. Starting with the comma following Shakespeare's and ending with the 2 commas following the singled-out sonnet number 122, These are all the numbers that stand out on the page where Shakespeare's is printed with punctuation, plus 122. Altogether, they add up to 1,716. When I saw that, I thought, well, that's interesting because it's just a few numbers shy of Edward de Vere's cipher 1740, only a difference of 24. So I went back through the pages to see if there was something I missed. And I saw it when I got to the page with sonnet numbers 99, 100, and 101. Can you see it? Again, we're looking for all the numbers that stand out, and along the left margin there's an acrostic of large letters spelling two, T-W-O. Combined with the catchword for, F-O-R, we get an L shape, which is the shape of a Mason square. 2-4 is 24, and this is the only acrostic that spells out a number on any of the pages where Shakespeare's is punctuated. We found the missing 24. It's also interesting that 2-4 is de Vere in French and Dutch. So from the comma following Shakespeare's to the double comma in Sonnet 122, all the numbers where Shakespeare's is punctuated add up to 1740, Edward de Vere's cipher. If that's a coincidence, then alright, but there are so-called mistakes in the sonnets that I found were done by design and with intent. You just have to figure them out. To have Shakespeare's followed once by a comma and several others by a period, and then a double comma at the first opportunity following the last number to be printed with the period, it looks like a pattern to me. And then for all the numbers to add up to Edward de Vere's cipher, yeah, it's difficult for me to think it just happened by chance. Not with everything I've seen. It's similar to what Sean O'Donovan found when he added up the sonnet numbers of the first 22 or twice 11 sonnets that are printed with italicized words. Altogether, the sonnet numbers add up to 1740. I explained this code as well as what's going on with all the double V's in the sonnets in video 44. Though there are differences, both copies of the sonnets are encoded. A Cairo symbol can be drawn on both covers and the bylines are the same, so both encode three examples of God de Vere and Rosy Cross explained in video 40. The dedications are the same, so John Dee's map to Edward de Vere's grave, as well as references to an illegitimate son, are there. Both copies are printed with 19 double V's and 17 sonnets, 11 italicized appearances of the name Will, the 2 commas in Sonnet 122, and other things I cover in these videos. I'm not sure what happened with the Let There Be Light Rosy Cross codes. The right copy has the necessary sonnet numbers printed with points, but the or catchword isn't, and the points are missing from sonnets 58 and 60. Maybe those notes were missing from the original or were simply overlooked by the printer. John Dee had passed away before the sonnets were published, so maybe there was no one to double-check everything before they were released. If Alexander was correct, when the Aspley edition was printed years later and backdated to 1609, then someone added the missing points. The only other thing I can think of is, if the Aspley edition really was published in 1609, Rosicrucian brothers saw what was missing from the Wright edition, made the corrections, and did another smaller print run, which could explain why fewer of the variant copy exists today. But considering this backdating scheme did occur with other Shakespeare works, it seems likely the variant copy of the sonnets was actually printed in 1619, and given the false date of 1609. Whatever the case, the William Aspley edition is the complete Rosicrucian copy of Shakespeare's sonnets. The Let There Be Light Rosy Cross codes were obviously done by design. I mean by adding the points to or, times, and eclipses, where they didn't appear in the right copy, we get the message not once or twice, but 3 times. There's no way that when the Aspley copy went to print, that the printer made even more mistakes, which just so happened to be able to be translated into these messages. And I think by adding these extra points, it reveals the mystery of the 4th T. These 2 codes say something about light coming forth and the Rosy Cross. And the third has Rosy Cross and 4 T's. so I think it only makes sense that 4T should have something to do with bringing light. Jack believes the fourth T is John the Baptist, and since John was a shining light who prepared the way for the light of Jesus, I'm of the opinion that Edward de Vere was given the title the fourth T because he too was a lightbringer. The fiat lux, so to speak, in this code, whose brothers of the Rose Cross would try to illuminate the world. I think 624, John the Baptist's nativity, is the date he chose for his philosophic death, which I talk about in video 48. And what a strange coincidence that 3 centuries later, 40s would be defined this way. I'm going to close with one more item. It's the same with both copies. I forgot who pointed this out, but in the Sonnets headpiece we can see 11 eyes in the characters that appear. I think 11 is a double 1 resembling a Gemini symbol and used throughout the Shakespeare works to indicate a double or twin. I notice that if we count the same 11 eyes but add the eyes we're not seeing of the characters that have doubles or twins highlighted in blue, they total 17. Are the 11 eyes hiding 17, hinting that there's a double or twin that uses the number 17? Now check it out. Beneath the headpiece is the name Shakespeare's, and R is the 11th character. Notice the letter has a break in it. When Shakespeare's is spelled with a hyphen, this R will always be the 11th character. However, some believe this was intentionally broken to draw our attention. The gematria value of R is equivalent to 17, so is R being the 11th letter, or double 1, and equal to 17, telling us that Shakespeare's double or twin is 17, meaning Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, which is similar to what I showed in the headpiece. I don't know if that solves the mystery of the broken R, but it's a simple solution I thought of. In the next video, I'll show how this 36, which is also a 38, and doesn't appear in the right copy of the Sonnets, reveals who 2T or twin T is. Another fellow researcher, Patrick Jennings, is now posting videos about the Shakespeare authorship question and the Prince Tutor theory. In his first video, he shows a method he discovered that uses a compass and a fixed measure to find messages in the first folio. It's really interesting, so please check it out on his YouTube channel called The Amazing Mystico. Thanks to Alexander Waugh, Jack, Chris Johnson, Ron Raffel, and Patrick Jennings, and to you for watching.